The autumn air was thick with silence that morning, broken only by the soft crunch of leaves under small boots. It was supposed to be a simple walk, just Miles and his 5-year-old daughter, Ava, wandering through the golden forest trail that had become their Sunday ritual. But fate, it seemed, had something else waiting for them among those towering trees. Because just beyond the bend, leaning lifelessly against an oak, was a woman. Her face pale, her breath faint, her cheeks streaked with blood. Miles froze. Ava's tiny hand gripped his tighter, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. That if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Bright Hearts. Your support helps us spread stories that remind the world what humanity truly means. For a long second, Miles couldn't move. He had been a paramedic once, years ago, before life crumbled around him, before the accident that took his wife and left him to raise Ava alone. He thought he'd buried that part of himself with his grief. But instincts don't die easily. The moment he saw the woman's shallow chest rise and fall, something in him snapped back to life. He rushed forward, calling out to her. "Hey, can you hear me?" No response. Her lips trembled, but no words came. Miles knelt beside her, checking for a pulse. Weak, but there. Ava stood beside him, clutching her red sweater sleeves, whispering, "Daddy, is she going to die?" Miles swallowed hard. "Not if we can help her, sweetheart." He tore off his jacket, wrapping it around the woman's shoulders. She was freezing, her clothes damp and torn as if she'd been running through the woods for hours. There was a gash on her leg, the blood dried and dark. Miles's mind raced. They were deep in the forest, with no signal. Carrying her was the only option. He looked down at Ava, her little face trembling with worry, and forced a steady smile. "Stay close to me, okay? We're going to help her." It took every ounce of strength Miles had to lift the woman. She was light, almost too light, and her head lolled against his shoulder. Ava walked beside them, holding onto her father's sleeve, occasionally glancing up with those big brown eyes full of innocence and courage. They made their way back to the car, the autumn leaves swirling around them like silent witnesses to something extraordinary. By the time they reached the car, Miles's muscles burned. He laid the woman gently in the back seat, covered her with a blanket, and drove faster than he ever had. The nearest hospital was 20 minutes away, but every second felt like eternity. He kept glancing in the mirror, watching her chest rise in shallow, irregular breaths. Ava sat quietly in her booster seat, whispering, "Don't die, lady. Please don't die." At the hospital, the nurses rushed her in. Miles stayed in the waiting room with Ava, his heart pounding, mind racing with questions. Who was she? What had happened to her? And why was she alone, in the middle of nowhere? Hours passed before a doctor came out, looking exhausted but calm. "She's stable now," the doctor said. "Dehydrated, injured, but she's going to make it. Whoever found her probably saved her life." Miles exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Ava smiled sleepily against his shoulder. They went home that night, both exhausted but strangely quiet, as if something deep had shifted in their world. 2 days later, Miles got a call from the hospital. The woman, her name was Leona, wanted to meet him. When Miles and Ava arrived, Leona was sitting up in bed, her face still pale, but her eyes full of emotion. "You found me," she said softly, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "You and your little girl saved me." Miles shrugged modestly. Anyone would have done the same. Leona shook her head. "No, not everyone would have stopped. I was out there for nearly a day before you came. I thought I was going to die." Her voice trembled. "I was running away from someone." The words hit the air like a stone in still water. She didn't explain much then, only that she'd been escaping an abusive relationship and had fled in panic, crashing her car miles from the forest. She'd wandered aimlessly until she collapsed. Miles listened quietly, his heart twisting with empathy. He knew what it was like to lose everything, to run, to hide from pain. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. Miles and Ava visited Leona often. They brought her flowers, little drawings from Ava, and even warm soup from their kitchen. Leona began to smile again, a fragile, grateful kind of smile that said more than words ever could. Ava adored her, always holding her hand and calling her Miss Leo. When Leona was finally discharged, she had nowhere to go. Her old life was gone, her apartment sold, her belongings left behind in fear. Without hesitation, Miles offered her the spare room in their small cottage. Just until you get back on your feet, he said. Leona hesitated, then nodded through tears. I don't know how to thank you. Life in the little house slowly filled with warmth again. Leona would cook dinner while Ava giggled at the table, and Miles would find himself smiling more than he had in years. The sound of laughter echoed where grief once lived. It wasn't perfect. Leona still battled nightmares, and Miles still carried his own scars. But somehow, they were healing each other in ways words couldn't explain. As the weeks turned into months, the bond between them deepened. Leona found a job at the local library, and Ava often begged to visit her after school. Miles, watching them together, couldn't deny the feeling that fate had brought them into his life for a reason. But just when things seemed peaceful, a shadow from Leona's past reappeared. One evening, as the sun set behind the autumn trees, a car pulled up outside their house. Leona froze at the window, her face draining of color. It's him, she whispered. He found me. Miles's heart pounded. He stepped outside, his instincts sharp, his protective side fierce. A man stepped out of the car, angry, shouting, demanding Leona return. But Miles didn't flinch. You need to leave, he said, his voice steady but cold. Now. The confrontation was tense. For a moment, it seemed violence might erupt. But Miles stood his ground, and when the police arrived, called quietly by a trembling Leona, the man was taken away. That night, Leona broke down completely, sobbing in the kitchen. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to bring this to your home. Miles knelt beside her, gently lifting her chin. You don't need to apologize. You didn't bring trouble here. You brought hope back to us. Ava peeked around the corner, her eyes full of innocence, holding out a drawing of the three of them standing under the golden trees. We're safe now, right, Daddy? Miles smiled. Yes, sweetheart. We're safe. From that night on, Leona stayed. Not as a guest, but as family. Together, they built something new, fragile but beautiful. Ava began calling her Mama Leo one day without even realizing it. Leona cried when she heard it, and Miles just smiled, knowing that maybe, after all the pain, they were finding their way toward healing. Months later, on a crisp spring morning, they returned to the same forest where it all began. The air smelled of renewal. Leona stood under the same oak tree, her eyes glistening with tears, remembering how close she had been to death, and how one act of kindness had changed everything. Miles took her hand, Ava running ahead, her laughter ringing through the trees like sunlight. Sometimes, life brings people together in the most unexpected ways. Miles never thought a random walk through the woods would lead him to someone who would mend his heart. And Leona never imagined she'd find a family in the man who saved her. But maybe that's how miracles happen, quietly, in moments when no one's watching, between people who refuse to stop caring. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Bright Hearts, and help us keep spreading hope, love, and humanity around the world. And as the golden leaves rustled softly above them, the three of them walked hand in hand, not as strangers brought together by tragedy, but as a family reborn through the power of love and second chances.